Hi there, welcome to Spotlight on Civil Contracting. This is the show that delves into all of the aspects that are within the civil contracting industry here in New Zealand. We will be talking with Jim French, Australasian Solution Specialist for Teletrack Navman. So we'll be asking the questions around what is telematics and how can it benefit our industry and our contractors. Jim, great to have you here.
Great to be here, Greg, thanks.
So I can tell by the accent that you're probably not from New Zealand. So just tell us a little bit about your background.
Yeah, so obviously I grew up in Ireland, lived in Dublin and then emigrated. So I studied surveying while I was in Ireland. And, at the time that I was growing up, there wasn't a lot of work. Ireland has a tendency to be boom and bust. And when I was in my early 20s, I left Ireland to go over to England, worked on road projects as a surveyor, some building projects as a surveyor, before moving to Africa and the Middle East to work in the oil industry, still as a surveyor. And that's where I got introduced to GPS and high accuracy GPS and the introduction of GPS into that industry. So I had no great desire to, live in the desert for the rest of my life. So I, moved to the southern hemisphere about 22 years ago now, give or take a couple of weeks. And I worked as a surveyor in Australia before getting more into the GPS technologies that were available. And then I went working for one of the equipment manufacturers, looking at GPS technology for machine control and guidance, GPS technology in terms of telematics, which is where I am now, and how that benefits contractors. Obviously, keen supporter of a certain rugby union team as well.
And on that note, we have to say a huge congratulations for the Irish win over the All Blacks. I hate to admit that, but I'm magnanimous and big enough to be able to say and give credit where credit is due.
And I'm equally big enough to accept it and gloat just a wee bit and reflect in the vast glory of that great win by Ireland over the All Blacks at the weekend. I think that should make us the number one team in the world.
Absolutely. So you mentioned telematics. I'm interested very much in this, and I'm sure that our audience is as well. What exactly is telematics?
Essentially, if you think about it as a GPS box on a piece of equipment or even on an individual, so that gives us location, and we need to get that location back to a server, back to the office, so we know where whatever is happening. So within the device, we have a telecommunication, similar to your mobile phone. There'll be a SIM card, and the SIM card pushes the location data back to a server. Then we look at the data and we can see the location. It's also used to transmit a lot of other information. So more than just location, you can connect to a lot of different peripherals on equipment to get extra data back to your location.
So what sort of things do we track?
Just about everything. Just about anything can be tracked. If it's got a power supply, regardless of its size, we can track it. And then for assets that don't have a power supply, maybe containers, you could place a fixed tracker onto it, which just gives the location of it. So, and it has a battery that lasts 3 to 5 years, depending on the application. So as long as we can get power to the device, we can track just about everything.
So what sort of organisations would be taking up the opportunity to use a system such as Teletrack Navman?
There's a broad industry cover, so from civil contracting, forestry, transport industry, services industry. So, for example, if I have a plumbing service and I get a call, I want to know how far away my plumber is from a job. If I get a call from a customer saying, "Where is the plumber?" I can log in and see where they actually are and say, "Look, he's about 5 minutes away," without having to call the driver to say, "Hey, where are you?" I'm getting calls from the customer. In terms of civil contracting, you have a lot of equipment that's on site, whether it's heavy plant and equipment, trucks that are coming and going, delivering equipment, delivering plant and equipment, delivering aggregates, and then transport companies. In places like New Zealand and Australia, everything is moved on road. There's a lot of transport on the road, and there's a lot of compliance and safety issues around transporting goods. So telematics is used and helps with compliance, work, health and safety in the transport industry. So there's no industry really that you could say can't benefit from it, because regardless of what you do, there is a place for telematics, and there are a lot of advantages to having it in your industry.
So you mentioned before about an example of a plumber who perhaps you want to know where they are at the particular time, what time they're going to be arriving. But if we take that, and perhaps another aspect that we all would know quite well would be Uber, where we know exactly where that driver is at any particular point because we're tracking him on an app. Is it a similar kind of situation from a management perspective, being able to track an asset?
In terms of tracking, it's very similar. But in terms of management for a civil contractor, for instance, you're not going to be looking at it, tracking it as it goes down the road, because, what I'm trying to get from telematics is not having to be concerned about where an individual piece of equipment is. And it's if something changes, I want to know about it, but I don't have time to sit there looking at it. Whereas if I order a pizza, I want to know where it is, and I may well sit there looking at it and go, but if it doesn't get here shortly, it's going to be cold. So, but from a civil contractor perspective, I want to know that my equipment is where I expect it to be, that it's actually switched on and it's working, and thereby generating revenue. And if there are materials on their way to a job site, where are they? But it's not the same in terms of I don't want to be looking at the screen all day because I don't have time for that. And if you do have time for that, then you probably actually aren't busy enough.
Very true.
Yeah.
So you have, with Teletrack Navman, you talk about 4 pillars of telematics. One of them being, the first one being asset utilization, and what we're talking about now is very much around that, knowing exactly where and when a particular machine is in operation. Can you tell us a bit more about that?
So when you look at asset utilization, these machines, they don't come free. They're very expensive piece of equipment. A lot of it is very specialised equipment, so whether it's drilling, then we have excavators, graders, bulldozers. So you've got a lot of very specialised equipment, and if you own equipment and you have it on a job site, you really need it to be working. So in terms of asset utilisation, we can look and say, I have 10 machines on this project, and it's 9 a.m. in the morning, and none of them are operating. Why is that? Then that can trigger the phone call through to the job site and say, I have no machines working, what's the problem? They may come back with, it's bucket and rain, job site's closed. However, when you're in a position where the industry is buoyant and there's a lot of projects on, then machines and operators become harder to get. They also get a bit more expensive. So if you're contemplating renting equipment, you need to have the information to help drive the decision. So if I can log in and look and say, I've got a 24-ton digger that's not actually working at the moment, and I need a 24-ton digger on another job site, I can check and say, well, this one hasn't worked for the last 48 hours. Can we move it? Whereas previously, the foreman might say, oh, look, we're really busy, we need to keep it, which forces you to bring another one in. So now you're paying for a digger when you've got one parked up. So we have this data that says it's working, it's not working, and a lot of the contractors that we deal with, and a lot of the contractors that are our customers say, this is one of the big benefits. They have the ability to move equipment where it's not being utilised, understand that very quickly and move it to a new project, and that really does help them with utilisation and cost.
So if you have situations where we have rental equipment coming in, how easy is it to install the system to these machines?
If you bring a piece of equipment in from somebody else and you want to log its use, a lot of the hire companies have telematics fitted onto it, and they will push the data through to you. So there's two benefits to that. So one is you as the hirer have information on how you're using the machine. Secondly, as the company that's hiring the plant and equipment, they have the same information available to them. So there's clear transparency. Everybody knows when the machines are working or not working. You know that some of the hire companies will prompt you and say, oh, you've got a piece of equipment on hire from us, and we noticed that it hasn't done any work for the last couple of days. Is there a reason for it? So there are benefits both to the contractor and the hire company in terms of the information that's available to flow between the two organisations.
On a contracting side, what is the challenge that Teletrack Navman is the solution for?
There's a lot going on a construction site at any given time. There's a lot of plant and equipment coming and going. There's a lot of trucks coming and going, a lot of light vehicles coming and going. So where are they all on the job site? How can I see without going out of the office to look and see where equipment is? How can I manage it remotely? Where are my machines? Are they where I think they are? And how many are in any given area? And is there clusters of them? Are the right machines in the right place? Or do I have the potential to create a pinch point because I've got too much going on in a certain area? If I've got trucks coming and going, I can see where they are. So it gives me a better picture of a job site without the need to be on the job site. So if you like, a virtual site supervisor, virtual foreman, because I can see what's happening on the job site remotely. I can log onto my iPhone or whatever, look at it and go, well, there's a lot of equipment at that end of the job. Why are we all down there? Why is nothing? But other than that is if I send a truck out to collect a piece of equipment and say, it'll be at gate 12, but somebody's moved it to gate 24, which is a further 10 kilometres down a road project, for instance, I can spend an awful lot of time ringing around trying to find out where that piece of equipment is while I'm paying for the transporter to be standing by with location. So knowing where everything is in real time has other benefits in getting to it. I'm sending mechanics out to a job site. That can be an expensive thing if they've got to travel for a couple of hours to get there, and then I've got to pay them to look for the machine for another hour or so. And if they don't find it and they go home, I've spent a lot of money for people to go looking for a machine. I still have a machine broken down somewhere, and I've already got a bill. So knowing in real time where the assets are is important, and that's what drove it. And in its infancy, most of it was around where is everything happening. It was only later that we start to evolve to add, connected peripherals to get more data back from the machines and indeed on-road vehicles.
So from a location standpoint, having the ability to know where your vehicle is got to be a fantastic thing from a loss prevention.
Absolutely. Yeah, and if somebody decides to illegally acquire one of your assets late at night, the ability to track it as it's been transported is another big advantage, because if you interfere with the telematics system, so for example, if you cut one of the cables, if somebody's going to steal it, they've probably done their research, they're probably aware now, sort of that there is GPS tracking on it, so they'll look for it. As soon as you cut it, the system will start transmitting alerts that say, a theft alert, for example. Some of them will, some of the easy way to steal something is throw a chain around it, drag it up onto the back of a truck, and off you go. So even if a machine is isolated and there's no power going to it, the system isn't shut down because it has its own battery source. So if it gets a sudden shunt, it wakes up and will start triggering an alert. So the alert goes as in the form of an email or a text message back to those who need to have it. That could be a monitoring company, security company, or indeed just the owner himself. So he gets a beep beep at 2 a.m, knows there's nobody working there, rings the local police, and he can say where the machine is at that instant in time, which can also help with insurance costs too.
Another factor you mentioned was driver behaviour, and we talk about one of the pillars of telematics being health and safety. How can a system such as this alleviate the health and safety issues that we have in the contracting industry?
So one of the biggest risks for any company is going to be vehicles on road, and it's not necessarily your operators or drivers. The roads are full of people, so there's a lot going on the road at any time. And it's been, we all know there have been changes in the, work safety legislation, and it's a lot more strict now than it was, say, 5, 10, 15 years ago. A lot of emphasis has been put on how our drivers behave when they're on the road. So with a telematics system, I can see immediately harsh braking events, harsh acceleration, and speeding. And if we start to see a trend in terms of that, you say, there's a section of road, for instance, where people are continually speeding, you can start to say, okay, we know that on this section of road, we're getting speeding events. You can then bring a driver in and have a discussion and say, we're seeing trends, you're speeding in this area, there's a lot of harsh braking, and there may well be a valid reason for it. May well be there's a training issue. Maybe the person is unfamiliar with a piece of equipment or a machine, but what it's doing is giving you that information so that you can make a decision and you can take action. And then, we can minimize risk. Eliminating it, when it comes to travel, very difficult. So we have to take reasonable steps to ensure that our employees are safe other road users are safe. So the data that's coming back from a telematics system gives you the information so that you can address any issues that may be there. And we have seen, dramatic changes in driver behaviour with organisations. And largely it was driven by the fact that the organisation didn't know this behaviour was happening. So with the introduction of telematics, they've seen, wow, that's something that we need to address. And they've done it really successfully, actually.
I'm being tracked all the time. I have a cell phone and it's a smartphone, so wherever I go, I've got location services on, and it's of great benefit to me. But from an employee perspective, how do you get buy-in? How do you get buy-in to, from an employee perspective, when everything's tracked in their work?
Largely around work health and safety. It's important for the organisation to ensure the safety of the driver, and I have to have measures in place to ensure your safety and mitigate any risks associated with driver behaviour. The vast majority of us, wherever we go, we're tracked. Nobody has really the time to sit there looking, at a truck as it goes from A to B, go, wonder why you turned left there. I'm not going to be getting on the road. Why'd you turn left there? Well, it's roadworks. So there are times where people initially will be a bit hesitant and go, it's a bit big brotherish. But once you explain why the need for that exists, most drivers will just go, it is what it is. And as you rightly point out, we're tracked everywhere we go, whether it's your mobile phone, CCTV, there's a lot of tracking going on. The benefits of this is, the burden of proof is taking off you. For example, if there is, sort of speeding fine comes in the post, or a complaint is made by a member of the public, I can log in and say, all our vehicles are tracked, but we have nothing. We haven't had anything in that area. It's easy to confuse one vehicle with another, tax vehicle. You can go back and show the data from a telematics system and say that, I wasn't speeding, the vehicles are tracked, it never got above 60k, whatever. So there is benefits to it. But overall, I can prove I was where I was. Can't be disputed. If somebody says you as the operator weren't there, I can say, yes, I was. So there's a lot of benefits in terms of that. And, sometimes you get pushback. I think we're at the stage now, Greg, where there's so much tracking. It's just something that's in the background and people, don't pay that much attention to it as much as they used to.
Obviously, there's great benefits to it anyway.
Absolutely. I can demonstrate that I was where I was. I wasn't at the golf course.
So you say.
Allegedly.
Is this an opportunity to be able to create a competitive league table between your operators and drivers to say who's doing things better?
Absolutely, yeah. And some companies do. At the end of the month, he who has the least points. So the system can be tailored so that you have scores, and that can be around speeds. The amount of time that you've gone over the speed limit we're all guilty of going over 100 to pass somebody who's sitting on 99. 100 kilometres an hour won't get you past it. So you will accelerate, and there's parameters that you could set and say, okay, if somebody goes above the speed limit by X amount for X amount of time, that's 1 point. And at the end of the month, we see who has the lowest score or the highest in terms of, if the highest score is the best or the lowest score is the best. And that could be like a voucher, for the local, the best restaurant in town, once a month or once every 6 months. It can have a bit of competitiveness in terms of, the drivers themselves. And you may then look at, say, okay, with this particular truck that I've got, whether it's a Volvo, Mercedes or otherwise, who's driving that the best? Who operates the CAT M Series motor grader the best? And, generate a bit of, friendly rivalry. Who's got the voucher for the seafood platter or whatever this week? So, companies can use it and put a positive spin on it.
As we're speaking, it just reminds me of the Apollo 11 moonshot, where the astronauts, in this case, every aspect of them from a health perspective was checked. Can you envisage a situation where we're tracking the health and safety of an operator in the similar fashion?
Biometrics has become a big part of it. And it's interesting that you say Apollo 11. So when you go back all those years ago, we could tell if somebody had a sniffly nose, somewhere near the moon. Why is it taking that long to get it to this level? And I guess, When you look at space technology, it doesn't come cheap. It's a very expensive operation, and the astronauts themselves are extremely expensive. They're almost like a thoroughbred racehorse of the aviation world. So when we take that down into a truck or into a piece of equipment, we have cameras that will look back at the operator and will pick up signs of rapid eye movement, which means I'm getting fatigued. They'll pick up the operator looking left or right, so he could be getting distracted by his mobile phone, or he's dropped his Mars bar or whatever as he drives along. So that's one part of it. We had a safety hack back in Australia, and one of the companies who talked about when you're holding the steering wheel, can I do an ECG? So, you might look at it and go, well, is that taking it a bit too far? But if you look at the average age of the operators now, it's not, in many parts of the world, the ages are creeping up into that age where, heart becomes a potential issue for us. Well, if I've got my hands on the steering wheel and my heart rate's high, it can be for a couple of reasons. Not getting into medical diagnostics, but, our fight or flight, your heart rate elevates. So more and more you're looking at the person behind the wheel or behind the controls. So if you've got a better understanding of them, and you can trigger a klaxon in the vehicle, and they go, oops, it's time to pull over. And that may well be a message, we've detected, it appears that you're a bit sleepy, pull over, have a rest.
So earlier this year, I had the great pleasure of welcoming you onto the stage as you delivered the industry survey, which is a fantastic link between CCNZ and Teletrack Navman. Can you tell us a little bit more about that relationship?
Yeah, so 2 years ago or so, we had discussions with CCNZ about conducting an industry survey. And for us, it's great because we understand what the contractors are looking for in terms of technology, but it also, from CCNZ's perspective, it's what's worrying the contractors, what's happening that they're concerned about, like what's the good and bad in the industry. So there's a lot of media around companies that fail, but the technology is there. We need to understand what people want from it. So we've had this opportunity to work with CCNZ for the last 2 years on the industry survey. When we initially did it, we were looking at the industry as a whole, and we sort of looked and said, okay, so what are the concerns? There was some stuff around legislation, some around procurement. And then from a technology perspective, what technologies are you using? How are they helping? Is there something that we need to do to bring all these technologies together? Is there more that we can do in terms of the technology itself? What exactly do you want from us? And for us to do that on our own would be, really, really hard. So working with CCNZ, Peter and his crew, who represent the industry, that's the match made in heaven, is from our perspective, because you've got the industry experts, the contractors, they're coming back to us and say, this is really what we need and what we want. So for me, I've been involved in the heavy construction industry for a long, long time, more years than I will ever admit. But so the ability to work with CCNZ and the contractors is terrific, because you sit there and we can go back to the propeller heads and say, you may want to do that, but the industry wants us to do this, so guess what, boys? This is what we're doing. And so working with CCNZ, working with the contractors, attending the CCNZ conferences, that's all part of learning, and it's what keeps the little grey cells ticking over. And, establishing a relationship with the contractors, these guys are great guys. They're like you and me. They're no different to but they're very smart individuals, because it's an expensive business. They take on a lot of risk in terms of, if I'm going to build a road, it has to last 25 years. I need the equipment to build it. I need the expertise to build it. So when you sit down and they tell you what they're looking for, it would be foolish not to listen, because they know the business. That's their business. We're just, a small part of a very big business, and it's the best business in the world to be involved in. Construction is great. It hurts you. It can break your heart, but when you walk off a job and you look and go, that looks good, boys, well done. And you're sitting down afterwards, you have a look at it, job well done, everybody's happy. So that connection, really important, and it's good to be part of it, and it's good to catch up with people and have these sort of discussions about the industry, not necessarily about the industry as a whole. What's changing? What's the trends? And then when we get asked, what are you guys doing? Where do you see it going? And you can sort of give a bit of insight and say, we have all this data. We're going to put it here so that you can pull your fuel data, you can pull your accountancy data, all your prices together, and you can look at it and go, we made money on that project. Maybe we could charge a bit more for this machine. Maybe I need to lift it just a bit to make a bit more on that. And this information, this constant supply of information helps, the big companies and the small companies to make more money. And at the end of the day, if we can contribute a bit to that, excellent, job done, happy days.
I think it's a very important point for all of us within the contracting industry. It's the opportunity to be able to make some more money, which can create cost savings, and using hard data specifically to achieve that is obviously a great way to go. It's fantastic to have your support with civil contracting here in New Zealand, and thank you very much indeed for joining us here in the studio as we're discussing telematics in some great detail.
Yeah.
But just a quick question here. Does your boss know that you've come and joined us here for 30 minutes?
So coincidentally, just as I arrived here, he rang me up and asked me what I was up to. And I said, well, I'm busy. I'm busy. So I switched off the tracking for a couple of hours. He doesn't know necessarily. He'll work it out eventually.
Well, it's fantastic to have you here. I concur with your thoughts regarding the civil contracting industry here in New Zealand. Very smart people, very intelligent, an extremely important industry for New Zealand in terms of the infrastructure. And I have a great deal of pleasure talking to my wife and kids about various projects as I'm driving through the roads and saying, oh, this one won an award and this one too. It's quite an exciting industry to be part of.
Yeah.
I just want to say thank you very much indeed for your partnership with civil contracting here in New Zealand and the work that you do and the solutions that you provide. Thanks very much for joining us here over the course of the last 30 minutes. It's been an absolute pleasure. We were joined here today by Jim French from Teletrack Navman. Coming up in Spotlight on Civil Contracting, our next episode we'll be talking with Cable Price as we talk around the National Excavator Operator Competition for 2018 and beyond. Please do join us there.